Good afternoon, and thank you for viewing our second workshop in the Universal Design for Learning in Higher Education series. My name is Charlotte Kurtz, and I am the Learning and Applied Innovation Assistant Manager, and I am co-presenting today with Dr. Stacy Dupfield, Office of Teaching and Learning Director. And then we have Lori and Tammy with us today, and we are going to be talking about group work, some challenges, strategies, and expected outcomes. Okay, Lori, next slide. When done well, group work increases learning and helps to establish a more positive learning environment. So our expected outcomes today are optimized student learning, relationship building, highly functioning groups, efficiency, and minimal instructor intervention. Go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to start with the first challenge that you often run into when trying to facilitate group work in a class. And I call this the Hitchhikers and the Hijackers. When one student takes over the group, monopolizes everything, and the only one that does the work, while everyone else sits back, not by their own choice, but because the other person isn't letting them do the work. Or you have your hitchhikers where one or more students just don't contribute. They kind of check out and allow someone else or force someone else to have to do the work. And then sometimes you have students that just strike out on their own. They either don't trust or want to work in a group, and so they just kind of do their own thing. But no matter what, that learning is really incomplete and certainly isn't the way you wanted the groups to function. So next slide. And so there are some strategies that that you can use to set it up so that those sorts of things don't happen, that you have more equal contributions and you don't have those hitchhikers, those hijackers, or those lone students. First of all, planning is really important. A lot of times we think we can just come to class, have students number off, and form a group, and you're good to go. But really, if you want a successful group, you need to do some planning up front and establish a structure, and then you're more likely to have success and high-functioning groups where everyone learns. Another thing that I would mention before I go into the content on this slide is I would provide a conflict resolution process. It doesn't happen often, but especially when you have groups that are going to be functioning together over a period of time, maybe producing a project of some kind where they have to work together over several class periods, or to produce something that's kind of high stakes, it's for a grade in the class, I would give them a process. Like if things aren't going well, do this, then this, then this. And that way you avoid having to, as Shar pointed out on that first slide, intervene. A lot of times they can work things out themselves if they've kind of been given the process and the permission to do so. So having that step-by-step process, like first do this, reach out to each other, try to work it out, those sorts of things. And then tell them, at what point do you reach out to me, and in what situations might you reach out to me and let me help you solve this problem. So some strategies I think that will help your groups function at a higher level. First of all, keeping the group size small. I know it's tempting, especially in larger classes, to do groups that are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or more. Really the optimal size, and research has borne this out, is 2 to 4 members. That way everyone can be involved and can take a more active role. It's better when each group member has a role, and so you can define the things that the group needs to do. They can assign it themselves, or you can assign certain people to different roles that can even rotate if you want them to, but that allows everyone to make a unique and important contribution to the group, so nobody really feels like they can hitchhike. They need to contribute. And then the students need to be doing real work. So don't assign a role that's just kind of a fluff role or a role that you don't really need in the group. Everybody should have an important job to do in order to move the project or the activity forward. Another strategy or another tip, I think, to an effective group is that make sure that all the group members are responsible for the learning. And so one thing that I have done is I'll say, I'm going to be coming around, I'm going to be checking in, I'm going to be asking how it's going, and I'm just going to randomly ask one of the group members to tell me what your group is up to or where your group is at. And that person needs to be the one to tell me. And you don't know who that's going to be. And so it really adds kind of a layer of responsibility that everyone needs to be paying attention. The other group members need to make sure that they're sharing and talking to each other so that they know that everyone in the group has done the learning. I think another thing that makes group work a good thing to do is that sometimes as instructors, we present something and some of the students learn it, or many of the students learn it, but some of the students need the information again or present it in an alternative way. And often peers have that knack. They know what will work, and so they can hear it again from their peers and learn from their peers. And that might be what it takes to kind of click for that learning. And then finally, you want some accountability, that the group is accountable for achieving the learning goals. And so you want some way to know that. So you've got some sort of product or process or something that the groups are going to show you or tell you that shows that they've done that learning. Make sure that you know that each group member is accountable for contributing that work. You could even ask them, what did you do to help with this? Come to this response or this answer or solve this problem. What was your role in that? And then I would recommend, especially maybe not for small in-class activities, but especially for larger projects, I would have the group members do check-ins and assess kind of how well they're achieving their goals and how the working relationships are going. So they could fill out just small little check-ins that are a question or two to kind of let you know how things are going. And that way too, if you need to intervene, you can do it early before things get kind of spin out of control or kind of escalate to a level that might make it hard to solve. Okay, next slide. So one other challenge, I think, is assessing group work. That's one that I've struggled with myself as an instructor, and when I've heard other instructors talk about how do I grade group work? Do I do an individual grade? Do I do a group grade? If one person kind of brings everybody down, does that bring everybody down? What do I do with that? How do I provide feedback that I know is going to be meaningful for everyone and give everyone what they need? How do I know that everyone in the group is in the same place and needs the same feedback? Those sorts of questions are definitely important. And so next slide. So some strategies that I think will help. If you've made sure that every group member has contributed meaningfully, you should have a sense then of where everyone's at in the group because you can see what every person has done and contributed. I would also make sure that everyone in the group is responsible for the learning process. And so if you have them doing some reading or doing some learning, some researching to find something out, I would make sure that every group member is responsible for having their own notes, that they can't just say, oh, this person over here took the notes for our group. Well, everyone needs those notes so that they all have the information. Making sure everyone's active in the learning. If there's a problem they're solving, that everyone's got a piece of paper in front of them or whatever it is that they're using to solve the problem, that everyone's part and active in that problem solving. And that will also help you to make sure that you know where everyone's at individually. Members can have different roles, they can contribute different things, but you need to make sure that there's an expectation of learning from everyone. For example, one thing I've done is that if I have people learning about something in class, say I was teaching about different types of learning models, I might give them all something different to read about a different learning model, but they're all reading something and contributing and having to teach each other about the particular model they read about. Another example might be that if they're creating something, that they each might create a piece of it, but they each have to create a piece of it, so that there's not that hitchhiking going on or that lack of learning going on. Another thing to keep in mind is that the learning can be in different formats. So people might be looking at different content, looking at different things, doing different things for the learning, having different resources, that they all need to be part of the learning. And you need to make sure that that's set up in advance and that's structured so that everyone understands what their responsibilities are. And now to think about it, assessing individuals or groups, you might assess a project and then everyone in the group, given that, hopefully they've all contributed and it's been a good process, they may all end up having the same grade in the end. But one thing you need to make sure is that they've all demonstrated that understanding. One thing I've done is that I've done a feedback form for my students. And so at the end of the project, if they worked on something together over a period of time, I gave them a questionnaire to fill out, each for themselves. And I asked questions like, what did you contribute to the group? What did and then each group member contribute to the group, and then they describe what their group members contributed. And then I ask them, and this is usually a pretty good question, and students are remarkably honest, was your contribution fair? Please explain. Did you contribute fairly to the group project? And then I ask them questions too, so that they can reflect on the process. I'll ask them, what could have gone better with this group project? And that helps me too, as an instructor, to kind of plan for that next time around. But also, I ask them to take some responsibility for it and reflect on how, and I'll ask them the question, what could you have done to make it better? And then I ask them, what could I have done as the instructor? Is there something I could have done to set this up better? Because I appreciate that advice. And then I, ask them just for any tips or suggestions for next time. And I always find those helpful. All right, and then next slide, and back to Shar.
Thank you, Stacy. The challenge for most faculty when assigning group work is how to create groups that encourage student participation, actively engage with each other, and take responsibility for their learning. So the next challenge is going to be that group management. So next slide, please. So some things that you can do or to think about is survey your students and ask them, their interests. Think about maybe asking them, how do they learn best? Describe who they are as a learner, what strategies they might use to be a successful learner, and then review the survey and assign the groups based on the feedback you get. Or you can even allow your students to either self-select or pick their own groups, maybe on research interest, or maybe if they look at the way that they learn, they can pair up with other members of that same learning style in the class, and then let them, pick their groups. So once you've got those groups established, now you want to provide examples of the group roles or contracts and agreements. So what that means is if you have an assignment where you have different group roles within the group, clearly define those roles and expectations within the groups. So if you have a moderator or a note taker or a researcher, that the students clearly know what they need to do. Maybe you might have a contract that you draw up yourself with the groups, or maybe you have the students think about their own contracts and agreements. How are they going to handle and work with students who aren't contributing? What are they going to do? And maybe have them create their own contracts and agreements. And then for the task at hand, so for the assignment, make sure you provide clear expectations for that task. So maybe you have a rubric for what you're asking them to do, so they clearly know what is expected of them. And then finally, be flexible. Allow, we really want the students to be responsible for their own learning and take active, be actively involved in the roles and going through that process and organizing, coordinating, and kind of completing that task. So really let them take the lead, be flexible maybe with the way that you want the assignment. Maybe instead of just having a paper, you'll take a recorded video lecture or a podcast or something, and let the students work together and create kind of different artifacts. So maybe, like I said, they're making a podcast or interviewing or something. It's really interesting to kind of see those groups flourish and blossom as they kind of figure out what they want to do to complete the assignment, and then let them use those different artifacts that they've created throughout the group assignment as their final product. Again, it's fun to kind of see each group take on its own shape and form as they kind of go through and complete that learning assessment. Next slide, please. So thank you. We thank you for watching today. And if you have any questions for us, please reach out to Stacy or I during any time. The next slide will have our information on how you can email us and reach out to us, and we would be more than willing to help. So thank you. I don't know, Stacy, if you had any closing remarks or.
No, just encourage you that if you have a challenge you'd like to help working through, we can definitely help you problem solve on that.
Yep. So thank you.